Did you have a nice as lunch as we did?
No, I haven't eaten yet.
Oh.
Would you like a
No,
sandwich?
it's okay. I had breakfast. I had a late breakfast, so it does look awesome.
It's
Is that a British thing? Cucumbers on
Kind
the
of.
sandwich?
It is
Avocado,
very,
I think.
Oh, we got avocado. California's all about their avocados. But I noticed that. Cucumbers on a sandwich. It's interesting.
See, that's like the most standard normal thing, but it's just cucumbers.
Yeah.
It's like the finger sandwich classic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. How are you guys doing?
yeah, great.
Yeah,
We
okay,
just
yeah, we're
watched the
great.
film yesterday.
Fantastic. Are you guys filming it?
If that's
Yeah,
okay.
if you're alright with
That's
that.
fine. I'm usually behind the camera.
You alright?
Yeah, we heard some incredible stories from.
Oh yeah? Who did
Yeah.
you talk to so far?
We spoke to
Will,
Will
Dylan,
Oh, that's awesome.
Thomas.
Okay, great.
and
Yeah.
so it was just them running around a hotel when they shouldn't have.
With BB guns?
Totally. There's a lot of
Yeah.
pictures of them too doing that crazy stuff. They had their own little adventures off camera too. It was fantastic. They really became a little family together. Yeah, I think it shows up on the movie, but yeah, they had fun. I'm glad.
Mm.
Hopefully we'll
Friendly
carry it
guys.
into the next one. Oh, yeah,
So friendly.
they're super humble. They're
Definitely.
super nice. It was it made my job so easy. You know what I mean? Yeah, I lucked out with them for sure. I mean, the movie kind of rests on their shoulders. You know what I mean?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you shooting for? How long was the process?
So we shot for 8 weeks, which
Wow.
is a very short period of time to
Yeah.
kind of do our movie. It was intense, but it was fun. And some of those limitations, help you. You kind of, working within those parameters sometimes forces out kind of creative ideas. Sometimes you're just frustrated. You have to compromise so much, but it's what we had, and it's what we tried to do the best with.
This is your first feature film, and it's shot wonderfully.
Cool. Thanks.
I think it really works. I love your use of close-ups.
Okay. We
'cause
don't
I
have a
think
lot of close-ups actually.
they-
Use them sparingly.
when they were though, because the journey is very emotional. We
Yeah.
don't get much information
That's
about
right.
the world they're in.
That's right. You're thrown into the
or,
mix
or
with
the
them.
characters. Really,
That's
it's all
right.
just about what they feel.
Yeah.
How did you go about, doing that? About following these characters?
Well,
in this...
I interpreted it for me personally as an experience. It's like you're on this ride with this main character Thomas. You're really experiencing the movie through his eyes. Only in one scene in the whole movie are you actually cut away from what Thomas sees. It's all through his eyes. It's through his point of view. But I like that idea of not spoon feeding everything to the audience, and I liked kind of just being on this kind of journey with them. And doing the best we could to make something that's entertaining, and make something that's kind of intense and fun, and cool kind of moments for you to kind of grab onto and be on the edge of your seat with, but hopefully also kind of, at least fall in love with these characters in some small way so that we can continue telling the story for the rest of the movies. It's like, I was saying this to someone else the other day. It's like, my job coming in this was basically to give the studio franchise. They have a series of books, and that's what they want. They want a franchise, and that was my job. But, my goal as a filmmaker is to make a good movie. You know what I mean? And so the puzzle is how you do both those things. You know what I mean? And, we do the best we can with the resources that we have, and I think we had a great cast that, you really kind of, latch onto, and hopefully we'll get to kind of just continue on with the questions that still linger and the ideas that we don't quite get to fully explore. We get to really, really tackle in the next movie where everything really grows up and it picks up right where the last one left off, and you get to watch them basically at some point, a 4-hour movie that have this crazy journey these characters go through. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's I things come to mind like Gravity and these kinds of movies lately that are very much like a roller coaster ride, and I think there's something cool about that, you know what I mean? So yeah, we'll see how that kind of...
You keep on mentioning the future films, and bearing in mind this is your debut.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with plans for the future, do you know anything about how that's going to proceed? Because obviously the films won't even come out yet, but there's enough groundswell, and there's lots of people going to go see the film. Fingers crossed.
Hope so.
Are you just waiting for the phone to ring?
No, I'm okay. I think we'll have. I have options basically. Of what to do next. I think unfortunately, enough people have seen the movie inside the industry. I think they see that hey, I know how to use a camera at least. So, it's interesting. I mean, right now we're prepping the sequel. I mean, we're gearing up to go basically. The fan screening so far and a lot of the test screenings have shown that people, for the most part, like the movie and want to see the next one, which is kind of by design, Again, I'm trying to deliver a franchise to the studio here. At first, I wasn't going to do the sequel, but, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to work with the cast again. They're just so great, So we're basically 10 weeks out from shooting right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we're in New Mexico. We've got stages. We've got crew coming in, scripts around its third draft already. It's freaking massive. It's absolutely awesome. We're changing a little bit from the book. I've kind of already warned James Dashner, the author, and there's some things that just don't work for me for a movie, So we're kind of rearranging things slightly to make sure that this really has a nice trajectory, a beginning, middle, and end. That the books can be a little bit more meandering than what a movie can be. So we've got some kick-ass, really cool movie monsters. Like I said, the movie takes place right where the last one left off. There's this really cool sense of growing up in the movie. It's way more mature, way deeper, more sophisticated, and it's going to be, if we get a chance to do it, it's going to be intense. It's going to be one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, for sure. Because, again, the scale is way bigger than the last one in terms of just resources and time and money and all that stuff, but also in terms of scope. The first movie is very much contained. It's a small little. There's no horizon line in the movie.
It's literally contained.
Exactly.
In the
Yeah.
Exactly. There's basically 3 locations in the maze, which is a challenge on its own. In this movie is actually keeping things moving when you have basically 3 places to go shoot. But the next movie is a journey movie. This is about kids. It's an on-the-run movie. It's a fugitive movie. These kids on the run through this terrible, dangerous environment. They're still trying to figure out what the hell is going on, along with all these crazy dangers, along the way as they try to find their way in this world. The first movie for me was very much kind of about high school. About how you don't have an identity and you latch onto one and you kind of navigate the dangers outside of your home world, essentially. And then you find yourself in this new world where out of the frying pan into the fire, what the hell do I do now? And that's very much what the next movie is about. It's kind of about college. It's about almost experimentation. It's about about these kind of ideas of growing up and discovering who you are as a person and how you fit into the world as a larger whole. And then there's just the cool mythology stuff that we get to kind of really start hinting at, all the things that were in the movie that almost and I got a lot of criticism for this actually in my short about I didn't have there's little basic things that don't quite wrap up at the end. And we get to kind of continue doing that in the next movie. And all those things that we set up, they all make sense in the next movie, you know what I mean? So it's kind of fun to think about this thing in terms of, it's like I grew up on Star Wars, it's like that you can watch those things and it feels at least like it was all planned, But, there's something cool about that. And thinking about these things, and TV does this so well, obviously. It's like, the stuff that TV's doing is like, they're 10-episode movies, you know what I mean, in Game of Thrones. I love that idea for movies, you know what I mean? If people can just be patient with us and kind of take the ride, it's going to be a lot of fun to go into this next one. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do it. Of course, who knows what's going to happen, but we're proceeding as if, it's going to happen. So,
what attracts you as a director to make apocalyptic films such as obviously Maze Runner and Ruin? Because they're fairly similar.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Well, first of all, if someone's going to offer you a job, you take it no matter what. You know what I mean? So for me, the post-apocalyptic thing, obviously you're talking about Ruin right now, I think when I came up with the idea, no one else was doing it. I mean, I've been working on Ruin for many, 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 many years. I think there's something romantic about the reset, the idea of a world where, you're kind of self-reliant, you're kind of, it's a world basically of treasure, like in Ruin, it's very much almost an Indiana Jones story in the future, essentially. It's a world that's basically come to an end, and it's this character that goes out and finds all kinds of treasures out in this world, and the kind of crazy sci-fi things that they can do. It's that Arthur C. Clarke quote, anything indistinguishable from magic, or anything indistinguishable, anything you don't understand is basically is magic, you know what I mean? It's something just kind of romantic and cool about it. What's interesting about Maze Runner, though, is that you don't know it's a post-apocalyptic movie. When you first go into it, you just think you're in, whatever, Lord of the Flies or something like that. You don't see any of those things, and we obviously, spoilers, of course, you see that that's kind of where they are for the next movie, and that's where the next movie takes place. But I guess that's probably why the studio, gave me this book, because after they saw Ruin, you know what I mean? So I can't say that it was totally intentional, it's just kind of where it worked out.
How closely were you working? How closely did you even speak to the writer of the
so
book?
when I came on, they gave me the book to consider. And I was talking to them about Ruin, what we're going to do with Ruin, basically, this kind of big franchise thing. So after we did this little screening for some people of the short on the lot there, they gave me this book, Maze Runner, and they gave me the script too they had also, and I decided that I wanted to kind of start over from scratch and do something else different with the book, and fortunately they let me do that. But I wanted to stay as close to the book as I could, because obviously, it's like the fans are the first people that are going to see this movie, and we need to make sure that they're happy and, kind of respect their kind of, desires to see what they want to see. And so after I wrote about the second or third draft, I brought James in and introduced myself and told him what I wanted to do. And he's always been so supportive of us. He understands that we have to make a movie, you know what I mean, which is different from a book, and they don't have to replace each other. They're just kind of operating side by side. And so, for the most part, he was just let me do my thing, but I would always go to him and say, what do you think fans are going to miss this if I take it out? Or do you think, what about this kind of change? What about this tweak? That kind of thing. And, I brought him out to the Glade when we were building that. And he got this kid in the candy store. It was fantastic to see his little world coming to life. It was just amazing, And then the last thing, I didn't let him see the movie when I finished it, but I let him come out to the scoring session. Mm. That was fantastic. It's just something so special about basically John Paisano is a kind of a newcomer himself as a composer. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that trained under John Williams, worked under John Powell and Hans Zimmer. He's got this really unique kind of mix of like kind of old school kind of charm with this kind of modern edge. And so James Asher got to come in and see some of the movies that basically have no dialogue. You're just seeing the scenes play out with a full orchestra in the background, just going through it's amazing. There's nothing like it in the world. It's absolutely fantastic. You never get quite that feeling again when you play it in a theater. It's just something not as special, something live, especially choir. It's freaking phenomenal.
I actually wanted to ask you about the scoring, because the score is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it really sets the tone.
Yeah.
Like, I think from the first couple of scenes in,
Sure.
like, you really notice the little melody.
Right.
That's the
Yes.
main theme.
Sure.
And like it keeps.
Well, that's the thing. So
it's fantastic. Did you give him pointers? Did you?
Yes.
How did that come about? How did the score come about? Talk to us about that. I love soundtracks.
Me too. I mean, I have been listening to the soundtrack since I was whenever Jurassic Park came out.
Yeah.
It was 93.
Yeah.
So that was the first soundtrack that I ever bought. And that's since then I'm a total dork. That's all I listen to, soundtracks. I have a huge collection of these things, and there's just something, for me, I daydream very well with them. When I'm thinking about scenes, there's a pace, there's a structure and a rhythm to them, so I typically kind of design, scenes to soundtracks, you know what I mean? So when I was looking for who was going to compose this movie, it's like, my big thing is, and there's no knock against, what people are doing these days, but it's very much in that Hans Zimmer. When he came on the scene, everything kind of became the Hans Zimmer sound, which is very much kind of this driving engine. It's this kind of this adrenaline, this pulse, that kind of thing. I wanted themes. I wanted character and emotion and those kinds of things. And John Williams was the guy who used to do that. You know what I mean? And so I talked to John a lot about that, and he obviously comes from that school too. So it worked out really well, I think. And there's some really strong themes in there, and it helps to kind of tell the story. Hopefully it's not so over the top that it gets in the way, but it's a nice kind of marriage with the picture, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for people to check out the score. I think it's fantastic. And if you listen to it actually in a full run, there's a true character. There's a whole story that's being played all on its own. There's a whole different themes that kind of emerge, and different sounds, different textures. And so we're basically setting up for the next score. And I already have some of that written. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Like I said, the next movie kind of just totally grows up. I mean, it just becomes way more kind of subtle and nuanced, and we get to kind of just do that as a team again. It's really fun, man. It's the best job.
What I enjoyed about it so much was like the strange dissonant sounds that would
right.
match the maze.
Sure.
Like
Yeah, there's a little
feeling.
bit of almost sound effect design aspect to it, right? Yeah, totally. There's also old class. I mean, we had the guy who played the Harry Potter theme played the piano in our movie. You know what I mean? We had John Williams, orchestra captain, the person on violin playing our movie. It's just it's like these are like gods, and they were just playing our little movie. You know what I mean? It's just fantastic. It's I couldn't. I was a kid in a candy store on that day. It was so fun. Yeah.
Any challenges particularly that you had to face during the project?
Yeah, it was two challenges, honestly. It was being tied to essentially source material. You know what I mean? I can't do whatever I want to do. You know, I have to stay true because, like I said, this is a franchise. I have to. There's a certain structure that has to kind of come into place. Certain things that have to be set up so we continue telling the story. So that was tricky. That was a tough thing to navigate personally. And then second was I would say the resources. You know, and this is probably not. I'm not alone in this. I'm sure any director on any scale. You can never do what you want to do, basically. You're always up against compromise, you know what I mean? But sometimes you really felt it, you know what I mean? Because we're a pretty small budgeted movie, you know, for what we're trying to achieve. So that was exceptionally difficult, you know, for the kind of big things that my imagination tends to be very expensive and big, you know, just finding that, you know, the bare minimum, essentially. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes good things come out of that process. But you know, those were tough things for me personally. Other than that, it was just the challenge of making a movie. You know what I mean? That's just a whole different kind of, you know, puzzle and you know.
Even with those restrictions, though, you managed to create an actual glade. Didn't you have the physical glade? Did you grow that, or
no? We
basically
went out and scouted hundreds of cow pastures, stuffed in plenty of crap along the way too. It was important to find a place that had character, you know what I mean, and it was also important for it to be a real place. You know what I mean? It needed to have real sunlight, and that was the big thing when I was making this movie. It's like when I came on, I was like, I'm not making, you know, and I can say this because Wick's our producer. I wasn't making Twilight. You know, I wasn't making this kind of teeny bopper kind of, you know, polished, you know, bubblegum thing, you know, with bright colors and all this crazy stuff. I wanted to make something that was dark and moody and sweaty and gritty and, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, the sweat you see in the movie, that's real sweat. You know, that's real stuff. And I think there's a cool kind of beauty in that, you know. So yeah, finding that glade was important, you know, and we eventually found this one place. I think it'll be on the DVD where I remember the day actually. We drive through this little cow pasture, through this guy's farmyard, through the grass and up to this line of trees. I'm like, this is it, guys? Really? This is what you want to show me? Like, no. Go down those trees. So you walk through those trees, and there's this little drop, this hill that kind of drops down into this little, basically a swamp. And you merge into that, and you walk out of that swamp, and you come into the glade. And it was fantastic. It was
was your glade.
That was the place. And what was interesting about it is that there was, you know, basically this little kind of fence line, essentially, of trees on the edges. And what it felt like was the walls. They were about 100 feet tall. And if you looked around, it wasn't concrete, but it was a wall around you. You felt closed in. You know, it just felt right. You know what I mean? And when I found it, it was in the winter. That's when we had to actually, which was tough to decide on. You're looking at bare trees, and you want it to be green. You have to just kind of pray that it's all going to green up when you start shooting in a few months. But yeah, we made the right choice. You know, it was a fun one.
What was your favourite scene that you directed or shot?
I don't know. It's like choosing your babies. You know, or choosing your favorites. I don't know. But I will say that there was one in particular from the book that that got me basically wanting to make the movie, and that was Ben's banishment. You know, that scene. It was like, I thought that was a cool idea of seeing, you know, kids having to you know, make adult decisions, you know, for the group. You know what I mean? And so that was like a scene that was just intense and, you know, brutal. You know what I mean? And merciless. You know, and if the studio was going to let me do that and put that kind of a scene into a kids movie, essentially, I was like, I want to do it. You know what I mean? So that scene, I think, just resonates with me in particular, just because that was kind of the thing that made me kind of see this movie in a different light, and not just a kids movie, but more of a movie with kids in it. You know what I mean? So yeah, but then other than that, you know, there's a lot of fun little scenes, like these little character scenes that I really like. You know, like that was the biggest surprise for me, is like, you know, coming from that background, like just finding these little, you know, two characters on a log talking. You know what I mean? It was like, it was amazing that kind of life that would happen, and that was a learning experience for me as a filmmaker. You know, but yeah, it's all, we shot it so fast. It's all kind of crammed together. I'm interested, you know, to see the making ofs and stuff, to remember these days. Oh yeah, that scene. I remember how that went. Right now, it's all kind of a blur.
Thank you, guys. Thanks
Cool.
so much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you
Nice
very
talking
much.
to you guys. Thanks very much.
Very nice to meet you.
Me too.
Best of luck on